Well, hello and welcome back. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. I have another video for you and I pray it's a nice escape from the day. Okay, so today is all about Distress Embossing Glaze from Tim Holtz. I actually shot this video several months ago and I'm just now sharing it. This product line is really fun and kind of opens up things you can do with products that you already have. Now, I have lots of examples, and each shows a different technique, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. There are many techniques that you can do with Distress Embossing Glaze, and I will link to a video in my description below that Tim Holtz did with lots of ideas, and I'll be sure to share more in the future. This is the Tim Holtz Distress Embossing Glaze line. You can see there are 12 different colors, and they're made to go along with all the other colors in the Distress product line. Before I show you more about these, there is another product that is new from Tim Holtz. This is the Distress Embossing Dabber. This is a very quick and easy way to apply embossing ink on a surface so that you can add embossing powders, or in this case, I'm using embossing glaze. I'm creating little swatches here of the different colors of embossing glaze and what they look like over white. Now, you could do this, and I have a free download to create your own swatches like this. Or another thing you can do to keep track of the colors, I thought I'd show you here, is to create swatches for on top of the embossing glaze jars. To do a little swatch like that, what I do is put some embossing ink right onto my cardstock. Then I add the embossing glaze, and then I heat set it. Then I can use a circle die to die cut from this, or a circle punch, and then glue that onto the top of the little jar, so I can quickly see the color of the embossing glaze when I look at the jar itself. What makes Distress Embossing Glazes unique is that it is a translucent powder. So it's like a glaze or a tint of color over whatever you have behind it. Here it's just white cardstock behind it, but you could put stamping behind it, stenciling, whatever you want. This product is excellent for layering. That's what it's all about, and the different looks that you can get by layering different products and putting this on top. And I'll demonstrate that today with several different techniques and cards. Okay, here's my first example. With this, I'll demonstrate how you can layer ink, stamping, and Distress Embossing Glaze to get a layered background. So I'm starting out with white cardstock, and I'm using a blending brush to apply Distress Oxide ink. You could use Distress inks or other dye inks for this, whatever you want to create a blended background. Now, I decided to use my Oxide inks because they blend beautifully and because the colors of the Oxide ink really coordinate nicely with the colors of the Distress Embossing Glaze. However, I did shake things up. I didn't just use the matching colors of glaze and inks. You can mix and match as much as you want. I'm trying to create somewhat of a rainbow effect here going around my card, but you could do any ink blending you want here with any inks or any inking tool. Okay, once I'm done, I like to heat set it. This is an Oxide ink, which stays wet a little bit longer, so I want to make sure it's completely dry. Now it's time to add some stamping to it. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool and the Simon Says Stamp UR background stamp, which you've seen me use many, many times in videos. I'm putting some adhesive on the back of my background. Then I'm laying it onto my stamp so I can make sure that the stamping is straight on my background. Then I'm going to close my stamping tool upside down, flip it over, and now my background will be straight in relationship to the stamp. I decided to stamp with a soft kind of gray ink over the background. So this is Gina K Amalgam Whisper ink. I'm putting lots of muscle into this because it is a background stamp, and I'm actually going to double stamp it so it stands out even more. This Whisper gray ink is nice on top of color because it just makes it a little bit darker there, so it works with all the different colors on my background. Once again, I'll go ahead and heat set this. I'm using the Altenew Leaf Clusters stamp set, which is one that I reach for often. I thought the solid areas of these leaves would be great for this particular technique. I have my background, I've put it back into my MISTI stamping tool and make sure again that that is completely dry. Now I'm arranging the leaf stamps to be kind of coming from the outside of the card towards the center. I'm using my anti-static powder tool, and then you can use any kind of embossing ink. I'm just using VersaMark ink here. And I'm stamping that over our background. Now it's time to use our Distress Embossing Glaze. This time I used fire brick over the kind of red area on my background. Because our Distress Embossing Glazes are translucent, you can still see that background stamping through it. They also have a color tint to them, so it actually makes the color darker there because I'm using kind of a matching glaze over the ink. Over the orange area, I'm using the Tattered Rose Distress Embossing Glaze. And I'll heat set that also. Again, you can see that stamping through your embossing glaze, which is such a cool effect. If you want your glaze to be darker or less translucent, you can double emboss. You can stamp it, emboss it, then let it cool, and then stamp right on top of it again and emboss it again, and that will make it less translucent. So it's totally up to you what you do. Here I just did one layer of each. I've listed up in the top corner the different colors that I used for all of the leaves going around the card. Okay, for the rest of the card I wanted to keep it simple because I didn't want to cover up all that layering that we have in the background. So I used the Birch Press Handwritten Hello die set. That's the small die set you see there on the top right. I cut the shadow from white cardstock and the hello from black cardstock and glued them together. I also used a sentiment strip from Simon Says Stamp Reverse Love Sentiment Strip Set. These are pre-printed sentiments that you can add to your card, and I really like the reverse ones because it's black with white text. I put some additional cardstock scraps behind it so it had some dimension, and I added to my card with liquid adhesive and the help of a T-ruler so I can be sure it's straight. For a little bit of sparkle, I used Lucy's Cards Ice Cube Jewels. Now these don't have an iridescent look to it. They are perfectly clear, so it doesn't change the color of whatever's behind it. And I thought that was a perfect touch for this. So with this card, you can see how you can stamp a background, then add embossing glaze over it, and you can still see the stamping. It just gives a bit of tint to your background. So if I were to have done the same card but just used clear embossing powder, those leaves would not have stood out nearly as much. The tint in the embossing glaze really makes it stand out and creates a really fun background. Here's another card that I did off screen. This is very similar, however, I skipped the background stamping. So I just did the inked background and then the embossed glazed image over that. This sentiment is from Mighty Hands, the Jesus Loves You die. And then this time I used iridescent jewels. So you can see how it changes the color behind them a little bit and gives a little more sparkle than the ice cube ones that I used on my last card. So with these examples, you see how you can use your Distress Embossing Glaze over inked or stamped backgrounds for a nice layered look. Okay, my next example shows how you can use Distress Embossing Glaze over texture paste for a really cool textured look. This works great with any stencil. So I'm starting out with a piece of white cardstock here, and I'm stamping that same background stamp from Simon Says Stamp with the Whisper ink. This will just add a little bit of interest to our background. I'll go ahead and heat set this. You could skip the stamping if you wanted to. Next, I have a wonderful stencil from Simon Says Stamp. This is the Tumbling Leaves stencil, a very popular one. And I'm going to just tape that onto my background so it doesn't shift as we apply the product on top. I'm using the Tim Holtz Distress Texture Paste. This is a white paste. You could try any paste that you may have. And I'm going to apply this over the stencil as smoothly as I can. I like to put some of it down on one side, and then I use my Thermal Web Stencil Pal to just spread it across even and smooth. This really saves a lot of time and helps to smooth it out and get into all the nooks and crannies of the stencil. I then can wipe any of the excess product off and put it back into the jar. I then will take my stencil and put it into a bowl of water until I can get a chance to clean it later. Now, the next step we're going to do before that texture paste dries on our cardstock. I thought I would add a little bit of sparkle embossing powder onto the texture paste so that when we complete our card, there's a little bit of sparkle to it. Now, you could totally skip this step if you want, and notice I only sprinkled it on. I put very little on to the texture paste. Okay, now I'm coming in with different colors of Distress Embossing Glaze and putting that over the wet texture paste. So I did a little peeled paint, some cracked pistachio, and you can see how using my fingers helps me to control where the color goes. Then when I'm done, I just go ahead and pour over any of the remaining area with broken china. Remember, the texture paste is still wet now so that it can hold on to the glaze as we add it. I'm first going to heat set a little bit from the back side of the cardstock. Then I'm going to bring my heat up to the front of the cardstock. And watch what happens. Our glaze will actually emboss before the texture paste underneath dries, which causes this really cool bubbling effect. You see that there in the middle? Watch the area around the tip of my heat gun. You'll see bubbles start to form, which gives the coolest look of texture. If you do not want the bubbles to form and you want it to be smoother, what you want to do is put the embossing glaze on the wet paste and then set it aside for about an hour. Then come back and heat set the glaze. That would give the paste some time to dry and it wouldn't cause this bubbling effect. But I think the bubbling effect is super cool. You can see those bubbles created there. Now I have done this technique with regular embossing powders that are opaque, that you can't see through. And it doesn't give as good of an effect because the tint in the glaze allows them to blend from color to color better. So where the colors overlap, you get more blending instead of like a mixed look. So I really like using the glazes for techniques like this, where you want to use different colors of powders close together. I actually created 2 of these backgrounds at once because I had all the products out and now I can make 2 cards. This one I let set aside to dry a bit while I did the other card, so it doesn't have as much bubbling. So really you can control how much of that texture that you get, totally up to you. For the sentiment, I thought it would be fun to cover a die cut with Distress Embossing Glaze to give it some shine and dimension. I'm using the Simon Says Stamp CZ Design Thank You die set. So I die cut the words thank you from white cardstock, and I'm temporarily gluing them onto a scrap cardstock piece. I'm going to press my embossing ink, I decided to use VersaMark, right on top of those die cuts to cover them. I could have used the dabber, but I didn't think of it. That would have been really quick to do. Now I'm adding Hickory Smoke Distress Embossing Glaze. This is a beautiful dark gray, and it looks really great on top of sentiment die cuts like this. So I'll go ahead and heat set this using my heat gun, and you can see the tint of gray, of dark gray, that this adds to our die cut. Now you could leave it as is, or I decided to put another layer on top. This will make it smoother and a little bit darker. So I let it cool, added some more embossing ink, added more of the glaze, and heat set it. I'm gluing these glazed die cuts onto the shadow for the thank you word. I then like to heat set it again. That way the edges of our die cuts are smooth. Sometimes when you peel those die cuts off of the scrap paper, the edges are rough from the powder. So by heat setting it again, it smooths it out nicely. Now these cards I created are from Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock. They're 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I trimmed my background down to fit on that. I do have some extra scraps that I can use on another card in the future. I then added Pretty Pink Push gunmetal gemstones to the background. I thought that matched nicely with the hickory smoke glaze that we put on top of our die cuts. Now look closely at our stenciled background. We've got those bubbles and texture, and then we have the smooth blending between the different colors of glaze we used. You can even see areas where like new colors were created where the 2 overlapped. So this shows that using your Distress Embossing Glaze with some sort of paste or gel is a great way to create texture. I think this technique would be fun on top of a translucent paste also. Okay, my next example shows how you can create a fun layered look on your die cuts using your Distress Embossing Glaze. For this example, I also did some stamping. So I'm starting once again with white cardstock and stamping the Simon Says Stamp UR background stamp. This time I'm stamping with Hero Art's Soft Granite ink, which is a bit darker gray. It's like a medium gray, and it's perfect for using behind your Distress Embossing Glaze because it'll still show through nicely. Okay, so once I have that down, I'll go ahead and heat set it. And now I'm going to use my embossing dabber that I showed you at the beginning of the video. I'm just using my anti-static powder tool first, and then wiping the dabber back and forth along my stamped background. and then adding different colors of the Distress Embossing Glaze. Notice that each time I overlap. Wherever I overlap, it gets darker. So, because you're building up layers, and it actually creates a new color. So I'm using 3 different colors of embossing glaze here: fossilized amber, broken china, and cracked pistachio. But I create new colors wherever they overlap. So I'll go ahead and cover the background, overlapping here and there, so I can get different layer looks here, different colors building up, some lighter, some darker. But because these are translucent, I can still see some of whatever is behind it. With my example, I wanted to show how you could use 3 different embossing glaze powders to create all these different colors on our background by overlapping and layering. However, you could do like a rainbow background with all the different colors of glaze, or you could even just take one color and just create a piece of cardstock that has lots of shine and tint to it. Totally up to you. Next, I'm using the My Favorite Things Mistletoe die to die cut from my layered background. Yes, this is a Christmas die, but I thought I'd give it a different look by changing up the colors and adding some flowers. I'm going to use both the positive die cut and the negative space pieces to create 2 cards. First, with the die cut itself that you see there on the top right, I'm gluing it onto 2 white die cuts so that it has dimension. So I have 2 white die cuts already glued together, and I'm gluing this one on top. You don't have to do that, but it really makes it stand out nicely on your card. Next, I wanted to create little flowers, but I wanted them to stand out a bit, to be a little extra special, and this is a technique that I'll be doing a lot in the future. I'm covering some white cardstock here with the embossing dabber, and then I'm putting on some of the Distress Embossing Glaze in the fossilized amber color. I heat set it, and then I'm using the Poppy Stamps Blooming Border die, one that I use a lot for little flowers, and I'm running that through my die cut machine. This creates little die cuts covered with the glaze, so they look a little more extra special than just plain white cardstock. Okay, so now I just need to glue all of this onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. I used liquid adhesive on the back of my stacked background die, and you can see how it doesn't look Christmassy, so we kind of changed up the look of it. For a sentiment, I'm using the My Favorite Things Impact Alphabet dies. These are tall and narrow, so they're great for adding sentiments onto cards, and I just decided to go with the word high. I die cut each letter 3 times from black cardstock and glued them together for dimension, and added them onto our card. Next, I have yellow flowers that you saw me create earlier, and also some blue ones that I created in the same way with broken china embossing glaze. I glued the flowers kind of scattered along the background, along with some yellow pearls. On top of the high is a sentiment strip that says "Grateful for your friendship," and that's another Simon Says Stamp sentiment strip. Again, those come pre-printed on cards, and you just cut out whatever sentiment you want, and it saves quite a bit of time. Now take a look at that background die. You have lots of color, shine, and layering thanks to the Distress Embossing Glazes. But remember, we still have all those leftover negative pieces from that die cut that we can use to create another card. So I have a white background die cut here that I'm gluing onto white cardstock. I'll trim that excess off later. I'm putting glue onto the back of our little leftover die cut pieces and inlaying them into the white die cut background. So this is just like putting a puzzle together. It doesn't take very long, and it's a great way to use up those pieces. Once I filled in the background, I trimmed off the excess white cardstock and added it to a white note card. I used the Simon Says Stamp CZ Design Thanks die for the sentiment, along with another Simon Says Stamp sentiment strip. So you can see that glazed look that we have in the background with the stamping behind it. And then I just scattered a few of the glazed flower die cuts along with some yellow pearls. So this card just shows that you can use your Distress Embossing Glaze on die cuts to give them a new look. And keep in mind you can add the glaze before or after die cutting. Okay, my last card shows how to create a fun background using the embossing dabber and the Distress Embossing Glazes. So I have stamped that background stamp once again with gray ink on white cardstock. And now I'm making dots of embossing ink using the embossing dabber. I then am adding different colors of Distress Embossing Glaze. So this will create dots of embossing glaze over my stamped background. Each time I use my anti-static powder tool, and then I add more dots of embossing ink, and then another color of Distress Embossing Glaze. I'm making sure to overlap some of my dots because remember, where it overlaps, you get a new color or a darker look. I'm going to do a little bit of a rainbow of dots across the background. You can always go back and make some of your dots darker if you want, or less transparent, by doing a second layer of the embossing dabber and the glaze. I continued until my background was covered, and then I trimmed it down and added it to a black note card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. The Celebrate is from Memory Box. It's the Celebrate Jotted script die set. I did the word Celebrate from black cardstock and the shadow from white cardstock. Along the background, I also glued a few little sparkly stars and gems, so just add a little bit of extra something to a pretty simple card design. I thought this would be a great celebration card. You could even use the dabber to make little balloons on a background. You can create bigger circles with the dabber if you want to, but it makes for a fun and quick background technique. Okay, so there are a bunch of ways to use the Distress Embossing Glaze. I'm telling you, it's a fun product, and it allows you to use some of your other stamps and inks and stencils and dyes in new ways. If you are interested in the different products that I have shared today, they are linked in my description below. And in the middle here, I have a couple other videos that you can check out. I thank you for watching. I hope that you are all taking care and taking care of each other. And remember, make cards and get them in the mail. We can all use some extra encouragement right now. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.